Hey everybody, this is Mr. CJ again here with another lesson. This is a great lesson probably on week 2, sometimes on week 1 if the kids already have seen the opening, our first lesson, how pieces move. This is our opening principles lessons where I reinforce a lot of piece movement, doing the same songs and the zigzags with the bishops and the knights, as well as just going over how the pawns move and how they attack. Those are typically the trickier pieces. But this is a great little quick lesson to introduce opening principles as well as the new special move that is called castling. Of course, the kids need to know how to castle. So I like to do with most of my lessons, I teach them with a story. This story starts with 2 kings. One king is named Lonely King Louis. The other king, his name is Fair King Francis. Everyone say, hi, Louis. Everyone say, hi, Francis. All right, so Lonely King Louis, Fair King Francis. Of course, this is a made-up story. I like to let the kids know that, just a tool to help them learn a little bit more. Lonely King Louis and Fair King Francis loved to play real-life chess. They would take all of their friends out from their kingdom and they go out to the big open fields where they painted a giant chessboard. They say, all right, you get to be the knights, you get to be the rooks, you get to be the bishops, and they would play real-life chess. Now, this was happening hundreds of years ago, about 500 years ago they were doing this. And Lonely King Louis especially loved doing this every week. Well, because being a king, it can get pretty lonely sometimes. You get so busy doing king stuff, you don't get to hang out with your friends. So this time he got to hang out with his bishop, with his knight, with his pawns. Of course, he hangs out with his queen all the time, right? So he's having a good time playing chess with his friends. And both Lonely King Louis and Fair King Francis were great chess players. They knew about attacking the center, taking a little piece out of Disneyland. Lonely King Louis was a white this time, and he opened up with e4, open the door. That's right, opening up the lines for our bishop and our queen to come out and attack the center, staking their flag whoosh, into the center of the board. Great move for Lonely King Louis. Fair King Francis liked it so much, he did the same thing. He moved his pawn up to e5, stay alive. Worth mentioning here, it's always a good point if you I know I haven't done it on the other videos yet, if you haven't taught just a quick directional, how to read the chessboard and know chess notation, spend a couple minutes on that. It's pretty simple, just showing them the grid and asking the kids where to point out different moves. That way you can continue moving talking with chess notation throughout all of your lessons. We want to be reinforcing that as much as possible. So after e4 and e5, what good chess players do, they know that they need to attack the center. They also need to develop their pieces, right? So we always want to bring out our knights before bishops. Everyone say that. Knights before bishops. Very good. So I could bring out this knight to c3. Raise your hand if you want to bring your knight out to c3. Not a bad move. The thing about bringing your knight out to c3 is it's not really doing much. It's protecting the pawn on e4, but nobody's attacking the pawn on e4 yet. So white has a better move. Well, maybe it's a better move where they can also make an attack right off the bat. So instead of moving our knight to c3, we're going to be moving our knight out to f3. Very good. Everyone say knights to the center. Knights to the center. Very good. We always want to bring our knights to the center of the board, not to the rim. Knights on the rim are grim. Knight not to the rim. All right. So knight on f3 attacks or threatens the pawn on e5. It basically asks black a question. You gonna give me a pawn for free, buddy? You're gonna leave it hanging there all by itself? Black's not gonna do that. Fair King Francis is a good chess player. He continues to develop his pieces. Anybody see which knight can move out to defend the pawn on e5? That's right, it's a knight to c6. I'm sorry, to f6. Always good to check out and see if the kids think that c6 is a safe spot for the knight to protect the pawn on e5, as we know that is in the knight's blind spot. And we say blind spot, not a good way to do it. But if you bring out your knight to f6, it is defending the pawn on e5. And so far we have attacked the center. We're developing our big strong knights and bishops. So after bringing out our knight, we want to bring out our bishop. Do we want to bring our bishop out all the way to a6? Is that safe for the bishop? Can the pawn in front of the bishop capture it? No. Can the pawn diagonal to the bishop capture it? Yes, right? We don't typically want to cross that castle line, that center line in the middle of the board. Everyone say, the castle line. Very good. The castle line. If you go into your opponent's castle, you better have a really good plan. And do you want to go into your opponent's castle with just one piece or your entire army? Your entire army, right? So don't send your pieces out too early. Instead, maybe move your bishop back to that explosion square on c4. Everyone go, yeah. c4 is a great spot for the bishop to be because who's the bishop attacking now? If you already saw or already taught the little pig lesson, you know that, yep, that is egghead. The pawn on f7 and f2 for both teams is egghead, a very vulnerable pawn to have, to be able to attack right at the beginning of the game. So after this, black came back and he moved, did pretty much the same thing. right? He moved his bishop, to C5. Everyone say BC5, bishop to C5. Very good. Also directing their diagonal laser beams to the center of the board and egghead. Great moves from both teams. Such good moves that this is actually an opening called the Italian. Everyone say the Italian. Awesome. Everyone say attack the egghead. Awesome. So anytime that you see the knights and bishops coming out this, you just know that you're doing a good job. You're attacking the center. You're developing your big, strong pieces. But back to our story. Lonely King Louis is looking around now. He doesn't see his knight. His bishop's gone. His pawn's in front of him is gone. He's looking around and he's starting to get really lonely. So he looks way over there, and who does he see? That's right, the rook. Now, if you didn't know, the rook and the king used to be best friends back in the day. They loved to play a game called leapfrog. You guys know what leapfrog is? Yeah, it's like when one person sits down and the other person jumps over them. You're right, yeah, but I don't recommend you do it. Remember, this was 500 years ago. They didn't know any better. Okay, so yeah, they loved to play leapfrog. So the king saw the rook, saw him and said, "Hey, rook, remember when we used to play leapfrog?" And the rook says, "Oh, yes, king, very nice. I remember, yes, how are you? I know that you're covered in gold now. It might be a little bit hard for you to play leapfrog now." But the king was so excited. And it was his very first turn. Since he could see the rook, he wanted to play leapfrog so bad, he jumped up out of his throne and he moved 2 spaces towards the rook. The rook thought this was great. He's like, "Oh, right, king," and jumped right on over him. All right, and this, of course, made Lonely King Louis very, very happy because he got to hang out with all these pawns. He got to see his rook, and his rook was towards the center of the board, but made Fair King Francis a little bit upset. From across the field, Fair King Francis saw Louis playing leapfrog in the middle of a chess game. He said, hey, Louis, what are you doing? You can't be playing leapfrog in the middle of a chess game." Lonely King Louis begged and said, "But look, Francis, please, look at this. Isn't this great? I'm protected by all my pawns. I got the rook out towards the center. Isn't this a great idea?" Francis thought about it. Said, "Well, all right, Louis, I like what you're doing here, but we're not going to call it leapfrog, all right? Instead, we're going to call it castling." Everyone say that. Castling. Awesome. So when a king can see a rook, it can actually move 2 spaces towards the rook, and the rook will leapfrog or jump right on over it and give it a big high five. All right, now, of course, Fair King Francis, being a fair king, though, said there's got to be some rules, right? Rule number 1, a king can never castle in check. Everyone say that. A king cannot castle in check. So if this queen is attacking a king, it would be an illegal move against the rules of chess to castle right now. You'd have to protect your king with your A, B's, C's, and then castle afterwards, all right? Now, rule number 2 is a king can never castle through check. So you see how the queen here is attacking the square right next to the king. If he wanted to castle, it would be moving through an attack. That queen's got her laser beam on that square. It's turning that square into molten lava, right? The king wants to move over it, he's going to burn his bottom, okay? You can't move there. So again, everyone say, a king can never castle through check. Very good. Of course, lastly, the king cannot castle into check. That's going to be an illegal move. And you can only castle on your king's first turn and your rook's first turn. So even if you move your king and then you move him back, sorry, he's too tired. He cannot castle, cannot play leapfrog. Same with the rook. But you can castle on both sides. All right, you can also castle on the queen side. So if you get your queen, your knight, and your bishop out of the way, yeah, as long as the king can see the rook, it's the king's very first turn and that rook's very first turn. How many spaces does the king move when he castles? 2, that's right. So the king would move 2 spaces. The rook just has to jump a little bit further to castle. All right, this is a great time for you to maybe set up a puzzle or 2 to check to see if the kids really know what castling is. Maybe have 1 or 2 students come up and castle on the king side or the queen side. If they and maybe set up some traps for them so they know that they cannot castle through check or while in check. You could ask them right now, can black's king castle? Nope, because the knight's in the way, right? So we'd have to get that knight out of the way, and then as long as it's the king's very first turn and the rook's very first turn, of course, the king can castle. So this is how I like to introduce castling to the kids. This is typically a little bit shorter of a lesson, maybe a 10-minute lesson with the opening principles. So I really reinforce piece movement here and the lesson of castling. And then I'll go on and let the kids play and make sure that they're, of course, setting up their board correctly, right, with white on the same side of number 1, the letters facing them, the queen's on their color, and then, of course, opening up the game. If you ever see your students moving their pawns around and not doing what we're teaching them, these opening principles, it's up to you to reinforce what we're teaching them, even having them set up their game again and then showing them the first moves. Try not to spend more than 30 seconds, I'd say, on each board. So just give them some challenges. Hey, attack the center, develop your pieces, and then move on to the next board so that you're not neglecting any other students there. But this is a great lesson to spend some extra time with the students while they're playing chess, to know that they're really learning what we've been teaching them in the last 2-3 weeks. All right, we'll be going over some more advanced strategies and some other, third, fourth, fifth week moving forward. So we'll see you guys there. Thank you.